Hey folks, this is Kelani. It's a pretty exciting time to be playing World of Warcraft. We have patch 8.2.5 on the public test realm, which is giving us a little bit of insight into where the game could be heading next. Classic World of Warcraft releases at the end of the month, which gives us a massive window into the very first version of the game we all know and love, and we have BlizzCon in less than 2 months. Personally, I think this BlizzCon is going to be one of the biggest yet, and not just for World of Warcraft. That is a bit far off at the moment though, but we do have a few things to talk about regarding the PTR and Classic WoW. There's a few extra bits and bobs ready to test for the next patch of Battle for Azeroth, and a few key features are actually being delayed, so we won't see some things that we might have expected to see in 8.2.5. There's also some more classic news, and by the looks of things, Classic World of Warcraft is going to have a very healthy population. Let's jump right in. So first things first, the 8.2.5 public test realm. Something really curious popped up on the data mining of the most recent build deployed to the PTR. Hopefully we'll be getting a few new updates to the PTR sometime shortly, because it's actually been unavailable for large chunks of time, which obviously makes it super hard to test anything, but on the upside that might mean more updates coming soon, which means more news. But what's kind of interesting is that level 120 boosts were included in this build of patch 8.2.5. It's not really all too surprising that a 120 boost would make its way into the game. First it was a level 100 boost, and then when we got into Battle for Azeroth, or at least sometime close to Battle for Azeroth, it was bumped up to level 110 to keep up with the leveling progression of the expansions. It's no good starting at level 100 when the Battle for Azeroth questing experience starts at level 110 now, is it? Remember that these boosts aren't just available to buy in the store and skip the entire leveling process over and over again, but they also come packaged with the expansion now as well. It's actually super nice being able to say to a friend, "Hey up chap, if you pick up the latest WoW expansion, you can zip straight into the new content without ever having to worry about catching up." I'm sure it looks very appealing for any newer player too. Being able to skip over 110 of 120 levels is actually kind of insane, but as we go higher and higher, the boost will follow along with us, so it keeps its value. The next step to that is a level 120 boost, but when will that boost make it in-game? If it arrives with patch 8.2.5, that would be super early. We're only halfway through the expansion at this point, from what little we know, or maybe just over halfway. Patch 8.2.5 is on the PTR right now. We know there's at least a patch 8.3 and a patch 8.3.5 in the works, so there's a lot of life left in Battle for Azeroth. I would expect the 120 boost to arrive with patch 8.3 at the very earliest, but I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. Wowhead did make a comment saying that even though it's in the game files, we have seen the higher level boosts in the game data quite early before, so we shouldn't expect to see it released with 8.2.5, but what this could mean is the potential of some expansion information being released at BlizzCon this year. If they announce the next expansion and open up the pre-orders for said expansion, which will probably include a 120 boost, they'll have to have the 120 boost to go along with it. Part of the hype of patch 8.2.5 has been the anniversary event, which will happen after BlizzCon, so 8.2.5 is the last patch they can get the boosts in the game files before BlizzCon rolls around. I might be looking into it a bit too much, but you never know. I fully expect an expansion reveal at BlizzCon. Pre-orders that go alongside it isn't too far-fetched. Now, if you're curious about whether or not the PTR is actually worth hopping onto, I can tell you that the Firelands Time Walking raid was just added in the latest build, so if nothing else, you can help by testing that out. It's probably going to be ridiculously overtuned for a bit at least, but most of that is probably to do with the actual mechanics of the raid. Stuff got hard in Cataclysm, and the raids are no exception. There's a lot that can go wrong in that raid. I'm actually really curious to see which bosses they nerf or reduce the impact of certain mechanics for. I hope they change as little as possible, because that raid was a blast when it was current content. I can see how it might be a bit difficult for a time walking raid though. You have to coordinate for a lot of the bosses, otherwise it's just a guaranteed wipe fest. I wonder why they chose the Firelands. Was it because it was a unique raid that really stood out in Cataclysm? Or did they maybe want to bring back Ragnaros yet again because we'll be facing off against him again in Classic very soon? Or do they just hate us? Because, let's be honest, no one's going to make him go right when he needs to go left. Rhyolith is going to be one heck of a fun fight. Either way, if you hop onto the PTR when it's available, you should find the Firelands Time Walking raid available to test. And I also mentioned that some expected content will be getting cut from patch 8.2.5. If you're excited about the Goblin and Worgen remodels, you might be a little disappointed with this news. The remodels for both races will be in patch 8.2.5 as planned, so you'll be getting that much at the very least, but the heritage armor that a lot of players assumed was going to go alongside these new updates will be included in a later patch. I guess we didn't really ever get confirmation that the heritage armor would be introduced alongside the updated models, it just kind of made sense. We know that the Goblins and Worgens will be the next race to get a heritage armor set, so it's not like anyone is going to cut ahead of you in the queue, but you'll probably waiting until at least patch 8.3 for that to come around if it's something you're interested in. I'm actually fine with them not including it in this patch. Maybe they felt like they didn't have enough time to get the heritage armor done, get a quest line made that made sense and was polished enough to go live, and make sure that was all ready to go for patch 8.2.5's release date. Now, we don't know what the release date is yet, obviously, we can speculate about that to our heart's content, but you can be sure that the Blizzard teams are working towards deadlines in-house. If a piece of content isn't going to be ready for the deadline, I would much rather them keep it for a later patch, rather than delay the next content patch for a few extra weeks. Battle for Azeroth is still a bit shaky, and consistent content patches is one of the best ways to address that going forward. I want to talk a bit more about 8.2.5 and a potential release date in a future video, but for now just know that heritage armor sets for Goblins and Worgen will not be making it for 8.2.5. I would encourage anyone who has a bit of free time and is curious about what comes next to hop onto the PTR and check out some of the new content. It's always super useful to get more players on there so the dev team can really iron out any and all bugs that players come across. If you haven't taken part in the PTR for a little while, you might not know that your efforts are actually recognized these days. For the 8.2 PTR, a lot of players were sent emails that detailed how many bugs were addressed thanks to the players' efforts. I got an email that said I helped to give information on 2 already known bugs and 1 bug that was previously unknown. So that's really cool. I know a lot of people say that Blizzard doesn't listen to feedback or to the bug reports, but I guess that's not entirely true these days. There's also a massive list of bugs that were fixed over the last few months thanks to players testing the Classic Beta and taking part in the stress tests. You should have a quick skim through them if you haven't already. It's super interesting to see what we found as players and how we helped to make the game just a little bit better. Whether it's raising a question about how something used to be in vanilla and whether it's correct in Classic, or realizing that hunter shots were acting a little wonky. Getting all of the bugs ironed out in this final phase of testing is crucial to make sure we get as smooth a launch as possible on August 28th. Now, speaking of classic WoW and smooth launches, I guess a lot more people were signing up and reserving their names than Blizzard initially expected. 2 servers, Herod and Shazra, are way past their capacity right now. A blue post actually popped up that said both of these realms could experience login queues exceeding 10,000 people if everyone who had reserved names on those servers tried to log in on launch day. 10,000 people in queue. That's insanity, but also freaking fantastic. A lot of people were worried that Classic just wouldn't have enough draw, that not enough people would be interested in playing an older version of the game, and that it would just flop hard. That's obviously not going to be the case, at least at the start. It still remains to be seen whether or not Classic will hold the attention of a new type of player, but it's amazing to see how much interest it has right off the bat. They also mentioned that the servers for Classic WoW have a much higher capacity when compared to the servers back in the day. Any server marked as medium population right now already has far more players than even the most active servers back in 2006. At the moment, there are no low population realms for the North Americans in Classic. Everything is at the very least medium. That's pretty amazing as well. Sadly, this does put a few players in a bit of a pickle. Well, more than a few players when you really think about it, if there's going to be 10,000 people in queue. If you were originally playing on Herod or Shazra, you might want to take your merry band of folks and hop on over to another server. Obviously talk about it first, don't just all split up, but it just kind of depends on what kind of experience you're looking for. I know a lot of players were hoping to play on Herod because it was the other high population server where the North American streamers specifically weren't going to be. All of the streamers are playing on Fairlina from what we know, so anyone wanting to avoid the streamers were going for Herod. A similar situation happened for the EU chaps with Shazra, I guess. That was going to be the main server, but thankfully a few more servers were opened up, so if you don't want to chance having a ridiculously long queue time, which you might never get through, because remember, you have to wait for someone to get out of the game for the queue timer to go down, and everyone and their mother will be trying to stay logged in as long as possible, especially for the first few weeks, so you might want to hop on over somewhere else, just a cautionary heads up. And then the last little tidbit of info we have for right now is that there will be no Armory support for Classic when it first launches. I'm not really all too surprised with this one. The Armory has been a bit iffy for a while now. It gets updated and then it stops working properly. They release an app, then they stop updating it, then they release another app and wait forever to update that for the current expansion. It's a bit of a mess, to say the least. But hey, it's not like we'll be missing anything relating to the vanilla experience because the Armory didn't exist back then. The very first versions of the Armory were tested during the Burning Crusade expansion, so I don't think the Armory is really that big of a deal, but for anyone expecting to use it as a resource in Classic, just be aware that it won't be available at launch, and we don't have any real info on whether it will be introduced at all. But that's all I wanted to cover in this video. What do you think about the level 120 boosts being included in the 825 data files? Do you think we'll get an expansion announcement and pre-orders opening up for it at BlizzCon? Does knowing that Classic WoW has a large community at launch get you more excited? Or do you think you'll be more annoyed about the long queue times? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.